people, their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more, no more complaining. People, their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more, no more.
Karith Foster is a speaker, humorist, and author of the best-selling book, You Can Be Perfect or You Can Be Happy, and creator of Inversity, a revolutionary way to address diversity, equity, and inclusion. She's a radio TV personality who has appeared on Comedy Central, Oprah, VH1, The Today Show, The View, her humorous and thoughtful TEDx talk, The Art of Defying Stereotypes. Learning to be true to your voice has garnered accolades worldwide. What I want to discuss first and foremost is this concept of you can be perfect or you can be happy. First of all, Karith, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this early this morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
My honor. So, I think a lot of us have this misconception that if I become perfect, we don't never say that. We all perfection is unattainable, but we have this idea that if we become perfect, then somehow we're going to be happy. It sounds like you feel they're almost opposed to one another. Is that right?
If you read the book, what I'm actually saying is that perfection is a lie. So I gave you a heads up of what's in the book. There's no such thing as perfection.
Got
it. We can certainly strive for excellence. We can strive to do and be the very best that we can, as we should. But to think that once we achieve perfection, everything will be perfect and everything will fall into place. And the reality is there's no such thing. There can always be improvement, sure, but sometimes you have to be good and happy with where you are right now, because striving for perfection may cause us to miss out on opportunities, not just opportunities, but on feeling good, on being happy, right? And that's where happiness comes into play in the conversation. And the reality is, happiness is as individual as we are, absolutely, but happiness is also a choice. Now, there's a caveat to this happiness thing, and that it's not a constant. And that's okay too. I liken it to watching the heartbeat, right, on an EKG. We've all seen it in a movie. Maybe we've seen it in person. And you get your highs when things are going really good. You enjoy the heck out of them. And then sometimes you have some low times, some downtime when things aren't going so well. And the idea is, not to stay focused on that part, understand that it's temporary and that you will go up again, just like a heartbeat. And just like with life, with the heartbeat, the only time you're in serious trouble is when you got that straight line, right? Because there's no coming back.
That is such a great analogy. I think that a lot of people think that happiness is I wrote 2 books on happiness myself, and I talk about the happiness meter and that we all have, everyone is happy. There's no such thing as someone is unhappy, in my opinion. There's a 0, but we're all somewhere between a 1 and a 10. And we can make a choice to try and aspire to be happier. And we've got to realize that it is this. And the more we begin to cling to, oh my God, I need to be happy. Oh my God, I can't let that go. Oh my God, then the steeper the EKG monitor is.
Exactly. Nailed it.
Tell me about Inversity. It sounds really interesting that you're bringing together these 3 concept.
Sure. Well, I thank you. I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk to you about it today, because it is a new concept. It's certainly a new word for a lot of people. But as we know, there are a lot of conversations right now happening around diversity and inclusion. And while I think that's definitely a good thing, I don't think necessarily all the way that we've been going about having the conversations have been as healthy as they could be. So the idea of Inversity is still taking the part of diversity where we acknowledge and honor and reflect on all of the wonderful things that every individual brings to the table, their background, their heritage, their identity, right? But it's expanding the idea of, diversity being more than just our skin color, more than just our gender or sexuality. It's diversity of thought, diversity of ideas. And the idea of inversity is, again, to take the concept of honoring all that we are, but shifting the focus from what separates and divides us to what do we have in common? How can we be truly inclusive of one another? But most importantly and powerfully, how can we be introspective, right? Meaning understanding your value, your worth, your connection to humanity. Because when you can see those things in yourself, that's when you can then see them in someone else. So instead of trying to, penetrate someone from the outside with the ideas of, well, you shouldn't think that way and you shouldn't say that way and you shouldn't call somebody that, you should be way more sensitive. It's like coming from a place of introspection, right? Understanding, how would I feel if this happened to me? How do I feel when I don't feel like I belong? Maybe I can then, take that experience and apply it to someone else.
It sounds like compassion as opposed to rulemaking. Yeah. Almost. I was surprised, and I don't know exactly what happened, that Bill Murray shut down the making of a movie recently by acting inappropriately. And he was like, things have changed since I was on Saturday Night Live in the 70s. I thought what I did was funny, and they haven't, that I've seen, gone into it. But it does seem that every decade or so, things that were funny are no longer funny. And it seems like it should be that way. I know that it seems like we're trying to sanitize comedy in the world, but I think it's possible to be funny without it necessarily being at someone else's expense.
I agree with you to some extent. And the reason I say that is because I'm a professional comedian as well. And that's how I started.
I know. That's why I brought it up.
I began as a journalist. I like to say I'm a recovered journalist turned comedian. And part of my attraction to comedy was this was the one place where you got to tell the truth, right? Where you got to be authentically yourself. You got to get people to think. My motto is laugh, think, grow, because usually when you're laughing at something, you're physiologically in a different space, mentally in a different space. You're open to hearing ideas and concepts that might normally be a bit taboo, like conversations around diversity. And the idea is to use humor to heal. Right. So my style is certainly not one of attacking people, of making people feel bad. But, having been 20 plus years in the comedy industry. Yeah, I started when I was 5. OK. I understand that there is, when times change, we do have to kind of change with them. But there are certainly things that were said innocently enough, back in the day, it was common. There wasn't a hypersensitivity that there is now. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to be cognizant and to be aware of how something may affect someone else, but there needs to be responsibility on both sides, right? There needs to be responsibility on the person saying something like, is how may this affect someone else? But there also needs to be responsibility on the side of the person receiving it. Am I going to let this ruin my day? Like, what was the intention, right? And I think so often we ignore the intention and just go with the interpretation, which very much can be a reactionary thing. And what a great way to have your day ruined, right? Because somebody said something that either you didn't understand or you don't agree with. And I like to think of it like this, everybody is entitled to their own opinion. Opinions are like belly buttons. Everybody's got one, right? And we're all entitled to them. And we have to understand that, we may not all agree on everything. And I even say that in my Inversity work. I don't expect everybody to leave a session holding hands, singing Kumbaya. But what I do want people to leave with is understanding that we are all valuable. We are all worthy of respect. And that's where this, the conversation has to lead to, understanding maybe why somebody was upset or hurt, and maybe why, what you said may have come across a certain way. Maybe there was a better way that it could have been said. But if we start canceling people out and not having these conversations, then we are stopping ourselves, right in the middle of everything, and we're not going to make progress. In fact, we're going to revert, because if we don't talk to one another, we're in serious trouble.
And we deal with people as groups as opposed to individuals.
Very much so.
And that's the challenge. You know, if I can write you off as a liberal Democrat or Republican, whatever, and then all of a sudden, as Wayne Dyer said, if I label you, I negate you rather than having to deal with you as an individual, which is what it sounds like your approach is. It's more looking at everyone's individuality as opposed to dealing with people as groups. Is that
without
good
question.
thumbnail of it?
That's you nailed it. You nailed it, Will. And the idea is, yes, we are part of different groups, but we're not monoliths. We're part of varying groups. And why? Like, how insulting, right, to another person, how insulting to yourself to be just labeled as one thing, right? We are so much more than that. We are divinely placed here on this planet to express ourselves, to be who we are. And how dare anyone put a stereotype or a label or a moniker on any of us so that we feel like we're stuck, right? We should be able to have full expression of who we are every single day, and that's a blessing to do so.
What's amazing to me, I finished a speech the other day and got off stage, and someone came up to me, and I guess because I looked like him.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Okay?
Yes, he was.
I looked like his type. Then I believed what he believed, and having nothing to do with my speech, the first words out of his mouth were very political, bombastic, and I was like, "Isn't that interesting? You've confused me because I couldn't believe further than what you believe." Mm-hmm. But it's interesting how we see someone and we begin to then it's like a computer automatically checking boxes after that rather than getting to know people.
Oh yeah. Well, and there's a neuroscience to it, right? Like if we wanted to, nerd out, we could talk about,
I love nerding out. Go for it.
We could talk about all the different ways that, the mind works and how we identify and associate. And, when we find something that we think we know automatically, our brain clicks into a certain tribalism mode, right? And but we do it on so many different levels. The other day I was talking about how, when you can be in a traffic log, jam, and people are trying to get in and you're like, no, nobody's coming in because it's been a long day and you're tired. You just want to get home. But, you're driving a Honda and somebody else has a Honda and they put their blinker on. You're like, oh, come on over. We're in the Honda family.
That is so true. And even in just that little bit of tribalism I've seen it. I mean, because there's a lot of that driving down here where I am going into Miami. And it's like the BMW seems to always be the one who's trying to zoom ahead of the line and cut in. And it usually takes a BMW or a nice Mercedes to let that one in. They're like, okay, I get it.
Right?
I know who you are. I know what's going on. Well, you've brought up a really good point and I've shared this before and it's historically factual. So it's not like I'm telling tales, but when I was in ministerial school, which is afterwards the complaint-free movement started and all, we had 2 days of diversity training. One day was on sexual diversity and the other day was on sexual orientation rather, and was one day and the other was racial diversity. So 2 full days taught by 2 different people. And in that, I found out that we weren't even allowing gays and lesbians to have at that point holy unions on grounds.
Wow. Right.
And I was like, really? It was like they couldn't see. They couldn't see. They were teaching us, but could not see. So we put together a petition and they changed it. But I think in a lot of cases, organizations look around and say, everything's fine. Why should we care about inclusion and diversity? So what would you say to that?
Well, I would say that it's actually a very critical part of the conversation, and not necessarily for the reasons that people think it is, right? Because there are a lot of people at this point in time, especially post 2020 George Floyd, who are like, oh, we got to do something, and they're behind the 8 ball and they're playing catch up. At least they recognize like there's a need for the conversation. But why is there a need for the conversation? Not just to check the box, not just to have quotas, right? But because when you truly have a diverse and inclusive environment, you are leveling up for success. And I think what a lot of people fail to realize is that when diversity, again, it doesn't have to be just a number of a certain color of people or a number of a certain gender. It should be diversity because you're bringing in people with different experiences, different ideas, different backgrounds who can offer more so that you can do more, so your potential is higher. And when we get caught up in the cog again of like the numbers, right, and the data, and not who the person is and what they can bring to the table, that's when I think we lose sight of what real, true diversity and inclusion is. And then there's the aspect of belonging. And I think we've all heard the analogy of, diversity is as being invited to the dance, and inclusion is being asked to dance. Well, belonging.
Oh, wait, say that again. I hadn't heard that before. I like that. Say it again.
Diversity is being invited to the dance. Right? Mm. Inclusion is being asked to dance. Mm. And my twist on it is belonging is getting to select some of the music.
Okay. Interesting. It reminds me, I think it was the New York Symphony Orchestra, people were like, you're not diverse enough, there's not enough women, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they started doing the auditions for the orchestra behind a drape. And still more men were selected. And that just reinforced that men are better violinists or whatever. No, what happened was the women were wearing high heels, and when the judges heard click, 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 they automatically took them down a few notches in ability in their own minds and didn't even realize they were doing that. So then they started saying everybody wears sneakers or whatever.
Right, flat
and
shoes.
immediately, more women were hired. Well, when you've got everybody looks like me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you become a closed loop. It's an echo chamber.
It is. And we that's also part of human nature, right? We gravitate to what we know. The phrase birds of a feather flock together isn't just popular because it's cute and it rhymes. It's because it's true. And we do that by natural selection. That's part of our, fight or flight survival instincts, right? Am I going to be safe here? Now, back in the day when we were cave people, it was, am I physically going to be safe? Like, is this a warring tribe? Is this a saber-toothed tiger? Now it's more, am I going to be psychologically safe, right? Am I going to be taken out of my comfort zone because I have to deal with somebody who doesn't look like me, who doesn't sound like me, who's not from the same place that I am, who isn't part of the same socioeconomic status, who doesn't vote like me, who doesn't love like me? And this fear factor, right? And I think, you and I can both agree that fear is really behind all of this, right? Fear is behind hatred. Fear is behind bias. Fear is behind anger and rage and all of the things that we think are outside of us. It's actually internal fear. Fear of not having enough, not being enough, not being able to compete, not being able to stand our ground. Fear of looking like the bad guy. Fear of looking like you're complaining. So much fear is taking a stronghold on everyone. And now we're afraid to talk to one another because we don't want to say the wrong thing. Well, guess what? We're human beings. And this is where the perfect or happy kind of comes into play, because we're not always going to say the right thing at the right time. And this is where we have to allow grace, not just for other people, but for ourselves. We need grace, we need forgiveness, and we need kindness. And that's a big part of the work that I do, which people don't think how does that fall into a corporate program?
Right.
But you would be surprised. You would be surprised how many people, once, the message is relayed in that space, they're like, oh yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I feel like that hasn't been an element of a lot of D&I programming for decades, quite frankly. It's been, you don't say this, you don't say that, this is how you need to treat the people. This is how many numbers you need to get. Well, where's the grace? Where's the love?
Interesting. That's the point. And we've talked a lot about that on this program, and that is a study a while back that good managers and bad managers both get the work done. The number one thing that they do is good managers manage attrition. There's not people jumping ship as quickly as they can. And it's just genuine caring. And I see that some people have already made comments to that effect. If you've got a comment, please post it in the box. This is your opportunity as well to share. That's how we build this online community, by you. and share. That's how we let other people know how and what we're doing. I want to real quick touch on, as everybody's going to come on and leave questions or comments. Her name is Karith Foster. Karith.com, Karith. Where did Karith come from?
So many moons ago, my father was in the Air Force. He was a captain in the Air Force in Great Falls, Montana. And he and my mom were one of 6 Black families on the entire base. In fact, their first year of marriage, they couldn't even live together because the base was full and nobody would rent a house to them. Because it was 1967. I talk about this in my TEDx talk. But the next year, they were able to move onto base together. And there was another family that was actually a mixed race couple, which was, pretty extraordinary for that time, 1967.
Yeah.
And they had a daughter, and her name was Karith, but she spelled it Careth. And my mom said, if I ever have a little girl, I'm going to name her Karith. Now, she changed the spelling to, Karith, but Karith is actually Semitic in origin, like, Arabic, Hebrew, and it means covenant, which is promise. And it's actually the covenant that God made with Abraham about success.
There we go. Very nice. Very cool. Karith, this has been wonderful. I wanted to just double check and see. You said you have a perfectionism quiz. Is that right?
I do. So
if post that in the box here.
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell us about it then.
Sure. So if you go to, Karith.com/quiz, the idea is to find out kind of where you fall on the scale of perfectionism. Are you kind of a perfectionist light? Is perfection your middle name? And of course, once you, take the quiz, you will get feedback in the form of a video, which isn't just, again, kind of, I hate to say the word attack, but, it's not to make you feel bad. It's to pull out, the positives that are, attributes that come with that quality. But also like how you can maybe kind of reel it back a little bit so that you're not missing out on the happiness and on the joy, which is what perfectionists can rob you of. Perfectionism, excuse me.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, to me, it's like stomping on the gas and the clutch at the same time. You're almost like not going anywhere because you're just struggling to be so perfect. When I led a group of people to Africa to help build a hospital there for a few weeks, and there was a man there who I'd never seen such perfectionism. He was supposed to build a bookshelf, and it took him 3 days, which it took everybody else about 15 minutes. But he agonized and he measured and remeasured and remeasured, and you could see that almost it was like an illness,
Yeah.
So
I call that perfection paralysis.
There we go. Absolutely. And it's Karith.com/quiz. Be sure and check on that. I have been going through I messed up my neck. So I'm going to see the chiropractor, but I keep singing this song over and over in my head. So everybody, this is our song of the day. Karith, what we do is at the end of this, everybody, wherever we are in the world, whenever we're listening, we listen to a song which I can't play because of copyright, but we invite everybody to attune themselves. So song of the day is Love Is My Decision by Daniel Nahmod, my good friend. Check it out. Karith, thank you so much for joining us.
What an absolute pleasure, Will. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my joy. Everybody be sure and check out Karith.com/quiz. Find out what kind of a perfectionist you are. Enjoy today. Alexa, play Love Is My Decision by Daniel Nahmod.
Plain free world, no more complaining people. Their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint free